Thank you. Excellent. So Piotr, you already presented some of the activities, which makes my presentation a little bit easier. I prepared just a few slides because there's a lot that we do in Heritage Science Academy, but it doesn't really make sense to get into too much detail at this workshop. It's a pleasure for me to be presenting these activities. I have been one of the individuals most involved in the development of the Heritage Science Academy offer. And if I wanted to define what Heritage Science Academy is, it is an activity of the European research infrastructure for heritage science that encompasses all training activities that the research infrastructure is involved in. Now, in many research infrastructures, the training activities are a little bit of a side activity. This is not the case with E-RIHS, though. And this is because very early on, we saw the opportunity to work together with users, to work together with access providers, and to ensure that an active dialogue is developed between both. This is because users in the E-RIHS research infrastructure are very important in that they co-create research with access providers. Therefore, there needs to be an active dialogue between both communities, and in fact, it very often happens that access providers can also be users in various research projects. Education is extremely important to the policy body that is ESFRI, the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures. And in fact, one of its several objectives, I think there are 7 primary objectives of ESFRI, is also education, which goes to show how important education and training more generally perhaps is for our policymakers. And while there are no particular regulations or no particular guidelines on how research infrastructures should get involved in training and education, each research infrastructure develops its own offer of training activities. And within the E-RIHS research infrastructure, we have organized those activities within the so-called Heritage Science Academy. The Heritage Science Academy was born out of the E-RIHS training strategy, which is a short document that outlines who we are training or who we are attempting to involve in training activities, what we want to train those trainees in, and how we want to deliver the training. So just very briefly, we are obviously keen to provide training for our users or potential users, such that they know what research techniques to apply for and how to best apply them to their research questions. We, of course, also need to provide training to access providers such that we increase the quality of training that is being offered, but also such that they can engage in meaningful research with users, because it very often happens that users and access providers come from different disciplines, so intensive interdisciplinary training is needed for both. And just to show how deeply we have thought about collaborative research, one of our first online training activities was an activity called Creating an Effective Collaborative Research Environment, which is a very short training video exploring how collaborative research works best, what aspects to take into account when dealing with disciplines or with researchers coming from disciplines that we are not particularly familiar with. Finally, we provide training for research infrastructure managers. This is something that we are currently developing, and not just in relation to E-RIHS infrastructure managers, but we are collaborating with other research infrastructures to ensure that those who manage access, so those who provide administrative support in the running of research infrastructures, share the same methodologies, share the same best practices, and again, provide the best service for our users. This is also why we provide training in different types of skills. Of course, we need to provide training in research skills, so how to use particular equipment for the diversity of research questions that we receive from the communities of museum experts, archaeologists, paleontologists, building conservators and scientists, etc., so our diverse communities of users. But we also train both users and access providers in transferable skills, which can be very simple, such as how to sample an object, but also quite complex, such as how to communicate more effectively. It has become very clear that while in-person delivery of training is very often preferred, it is also not extremely practical, especially for those audiences who are not European and where traveling would either be too costly or take too much time. Therefore, in a recent questionnaire, which we distributed in our community, it came through quite clearly that our community desires to have remote or hybrid training over in-person training. However, in-person training cannot be delivered in any other way than obviously person to person while training for access, so during actual access projects. And it very often happens that access projects that are delivered in the form of FixLab or MoLab start with an intensive training period. We are also thinking about where to go in the future with our Heritage Science Academy, so how to develop it such that it serves our community better. And we have organized last year and this year 2 intensive workshops, 2 intensive roundtable debates to see how we enable education and training through E-RIHS in order to promote interdisciplinary heritage science education in collaboration with higher education institutes. And we see lots of potential for development, specifically in relation to enabling infrastructure access for students, where such infrastructure access might require different modalities of access. We will also explore co-supervision of such students by access scientists. We will also intensify training provision through hands-on training at E-RIHS, at our research infrastructure, and we are intensively exploring even joint development and delivery of training and higher education provision. There is nothing preventing, for example, research infrastructures from becoming involved in formal university education. There is lots to be gained from such collaboration. Much has been said about Heritage Science Academy activities already, so I'm just providing one slide to show how many participants have engaged in our training activities. Each year we organize a lecture series. This is organized by a young editorial board of heritage scientists, typically 6 members of the editorial board, who prepare a program of lecture series. And in 2024, We already had 2,500 participants who are obviously online, and typically about 100 per lecture, and they come from all around the world. So not at all focused on European countries, but they typically come from non-European countries as well, which just goes to show how important online teaching and learning is. Our webinar series is similar in some aspects to the lecture series, but it's slightly different in that it is conceptualized more as a promotional webinar tool. So to promote successful case studies or promote successful research, or to engage our community in slightly more policy-driven discussions and similar. We also run a successful LinkedIn platform with almost 3,000 users, where we not only inform our community of E-RIHS-related activities, but also engage in conversations with them. We have, as I already mentioned, also organized workshops in order to promote and develop our training and education activities. And we typically organize one summer school and one training camp per year. Now, these are typically in-person training activities. So these are typically slightly smaller activities. Training camps are and summer schools are typically for 50 to 70 participants, with a few more online, but typically we want to promote hands-on learning during these events. In the future, and as E-RIHS becomes an established research infrastructure, we also plan to organize annual conferences, annual E-RIHS conferences, obviously to showcase best practices and to inform our audiences of the excellent research being carried out within the E-RIHS research infrastructure. All our online resources, all our online events, training events, either webinars or lectures, are available as online recordings as well. So I invite everyone to have a look at the training videos that are available through the E-RIHS YouTube channel, and have a look at our HS Academy platform, which is part of the developing E-RIHS website and is also being developed such that the training offer is available to everyone at a glance. I think this is all from me, and over to you, Piotr.